I'm making a video game with underwater mechanics. In this devlog, main menu updates, restorable keybinds, updated art, additional levels. The main menu used outdated UI components, so it was brought up to the same style as the rest of the game. I started by copying the buttons and wiring the dive-in button, since a function already existed for it. I created the options panel based off of the pause menu, deleting the general panel. I deleted the old options group and unbound the action handlers. Then, I just had to update the new options button to bring up the panel for everything to work again. Now the menu and its options are consistent with the rest of the game. To make it play nicely with a controller, the first button becomes selected after the menu loads. On the last devlog, I made the controls rebindable, but they cannot easily be restored. I started by wiring the restore button to a function on the input manager. Then, I worked on creating a restore button for a particular binding, which calls the rebindable button in order to get the text to refresh. Similar to last time, I then had to add special logic for the move left and right keyboard binding, so I got that working next. Once all the buttons were set up, I ran through a test to ensure I wired everything correctly. While checking the bindings for the keyboard, I ran into a bug that allowed you to bind the escape key. It seems this is a known Unity problem. However, since I used escape to cancel the rebind action, I had to use a different solution, which ended up fixing the issue for me as well. In order to ensure styling is consistent for all the elements in the menu, I created an editor to check a game object's hierarchy for the presence of a font. The editor actually caught an inconsistent font usage in one of the panels. With the menus up to date, I proceeded to create the next 3 levels. Since I wasn't happy with the current anemone, I spent some time remaking it and ended up making a larger but better looking one. Then, I went through each level and replaced the anemone with a larger version, adjusting the arrangements of traps based on the new size. Adding a new level requires adding a new enumeration constant with the level name and updating a few switch statements to define the oxygen and treasure chests. I wondered if there was a better way of managing this, and I had an idea when I saw a tutorial on scriptable objects. I created a scriptable object definition for the oxygen and available treasures for a level and created the first object. I updated the game manager to use the new object, wired it for the first level, and tested it out. Then, I created scriptable objects for each of the levels. I wired the level settings object into the game manager for each of the levels. I also updated the scene checklist editor to now check that the game manager has this reference set. I wanted to add variation to the way the morays move by setting up a set of morays that alternate between each side, leaving an open path between them. I first tried to set this up with 2 distinct morays, but had a hard time figuring out the math for them. Instead of trying to get the math right, I created a component that would handle the alternating parts, and while creating that, I figured out the math. However, it is much easier to have a parent controller handle the alternation than replicating values between 2 components, and it makes it easier to set up. I started with a sketch that is based off of an aerial view of a castle. The blockout stage started with the left chamber and hall. As usual, I did a distance check with both chests to ensure the level wasn't too big. In this clip, it took me 82 seconds to gather both chests, which is above what I want a medium level to take, so the level decreased in size a bit. After a few iterations and distance checking, I had resized the level enough to be happy with it. With the size out of the way, I started laying out the enemies. On the left tower, I set up a combination between the morays and the pufferfish for some new challenge. Then, I ran through the level to ensure I could beat it in the desired time with the existing enemies and traps. One of the sections was particularly tricky, so I adjusted it in order to reduce the time needed to complete the level. Once that was settled, it was time for the usual art pass. Create the collider tiles, create the filler terrain and water, then adjust the filler tiles based on player camera. Lastly, I attempted a couple of speedruns to ensure the level was still beatable in the desired time. Here's a high-level overview of this level. Fitting the theme of the world, this level sketch is based on a castle. For this level, I wanted to place a chest in each tower and have a shared middle area the player can go through. I started by blocking out the towers and setting the height for both of them. The first size was way too small based on my distance check between the starting point and a tower. I resized the level and checked the size, which felt slightly short, but I figured it would be fine once I added the chests and traps. I then added the traps to the right tower, setting up a path using the alternating morays. After setting the enemies, I ran through the level gathering both chests. The entry hallway felt a bit unnecessary and I eventually got rid of it. Happy with the shape, as usual, it was time for some art. Before setting the collider tiles, I played with some arrangements for the tips of each tower. With those ideas, I proceeded with the collidable tile map. While setting up the filler tiles, I gave the level a more tower-like shape. Once the art pass was done, I ran through the level to check the time it would take. Since this run took less than 40 seconds, this makes this level slightly bigger than the easy levels, but smaller than a medium level. So this level will be the suggested third level for the second world. Here's a high-level overview of this level. With the tower theme in mind, I made a sketch for the fifth level based on a tower. I wanted both chests to be close to each other, similar to level 4 in World 1, so I started by blocking out the tower side. With the level being mostly a tower, I decided to copy the blockouts for the third and fourth level in the first world and compare their sizes to this level. In order to keep things consistent, I went back through my clips and made a chart of the time it took to beat each level while developing. The first run through the blockout check also showed me the level was too small. I resized the level a bit and then did a run checking the distance, comparing the time results to the ones for the prior world to better decide on the sizing. More content with the size, I started laying out the traps, heavily focusing on the tower section since it is the focus of the level. Then I ran through the level with all of the traps set up. This felt much better, so it was time for the usual art pass. Setting up the collider tiles was pretty straightforward. Like the other levels, I used the filler tiles to give the tower a better shape. Then, I updated the water tiles and adjusted the filler based on the player camera. Finally, a couple of run-throughs to check the final size and time. Here's a high-level overview of this level. That's it for this devlog. My focus for the next part will be create the final level for the second world. Create the level selection map and wire selection for all 12 levels. Until next time.